that I'm able to give back a bit, because these are definitely tips I wish I had had when I was a student in your position. Because frankly, I made some terrible financial decisions as a student. So I hope these tips and bits of advice can help. So we're going to cover general money management tips. I guess you would class that as your budgeting for university. Then we'll touch on some how to get started with investing tips, and finish off with sort of more banking specific tips. Okay, so the first thing I would say, if we can move on to the next slide, please, is that money management in general, the rules that you have to follow are simple, but they're not easy. And what I mean by that is they're right there. Those 5 steps right there are very simple, but they're difficult to follow because of human behavior and human emotion. So the first one is, I hope quite obvious, but is to spend less than you earn, or to spend less than the money you've got coming in. Then you save the difference. With those savings, buy a diversified portfolio of the great companies of the world. Fourth, be patient, and then go back to one and repeat. Okay. And so that's what I mean by it's really simple. Literally, if you follow those 5 rules for the rest of your life, you will find that you're in a very wealthy position later on. And the graph, the little picture in the bottom corner of this slide really just is there to emphasize that there are, I guess, 4 levers to how you can be successful financially. And that is how much you earn, how much you spend, what your savings rate is, and how much of those savings do you invest. Now, you can obviously control your spending, you can control to some extent how much you save, and you can control how much you invest of those savings as well. You might not necessarily always be able to control your earning, but you can in some regards, because you can become more educated, as you're doing now, become more qualified, gain experience, etc., and negotiate better pay packets. So largely, the good news is this is all within your control. And so really, before we sort of get into some of the nuts and bolts around university budgeting, etc., I think when we speak to a lot of clients, what they're really after is financial freedom, and that loosely translates, as clients tell us, into being able to do what you want, when you want, with who you want, and not having to worry about the financial consequences of that, like knowing you're going to be safe. So really, what we're trying to do here is minimize the stress of money by introducing some structure, taking control of money so it doesn't control you. And what you really want to be able to do is automate everything. And what I mean by that is, if you can work out what needs to be paid when, and set up a process of automation, and in the UK specifically, that's really easy, because you've got direct debits, you've got standing orders. You can know your bill is your electricity bill needs paying, and it will just come out of your account automatically. You can set up a standing order to your own savings account or your own investment account, and that'll come really easily. And then once everything's automated, like half the stress of money is just knowing what's coming in, what's going out, and trying to keep track of all those things. So if you can find ways to automate that, it's going to really minimize that stress. And one thing, and this is probably the most salient point specifically from this slide, but as university students, your income might come from a part-time job you picked up while studying, but for the majority of you, it's going to be financial government grants or scholarships, or maybe even an allowance from parents or family. And the best thing that you can do in when that money comes in, because it probably comes in annually or periodically if it's a grant, is to put it in one account and then open up a second account and then put a portion of that, automatically transfer a portion of that every month, so you've got all the money you need for that particular month is in the account that you access day to day, and then all the rest of it is being safeguarded for the remaining 11 months of the year, meaning you don't accidentally dip into it, because trust me, it's very easy to dip into it if it's there all the time. Okay. And by the way, if anyone, I should have said this earlier, if anyone has any questions, there'll be a chance for questions at the end. But if there's anything you really want to delve deep into, just put it into the chat, and if it's appropriate, I'll try and answer it at the time. So moving on to sort of what is a key principle, it's kind of there in the title, is to spend wisely. And what do we mean by that? One question we ask every single client when they come in is, why is money important to you? And we get a whole range of answers. But for those based in Cayman, I can give you examples of some, of a few. So that might be spend time with family. It allows me to live worry-free. It provides security for my future. It allows us to give our kids the opportunities that we didn't have. It allows us the opportunity to put our kids through university, etc., etc. Travel lots. And it really, when you distill that down, it really comes back to doing what we want, when we want, with who we want, where we want, and not having to worry about it financially. So a bit of homework for you guys is to ask yourself that question. And anytime you sort of write an answer, it might be to travel lots, for instance. Dig a bit deeper and keep asking yourself why, and ask yourself, why have you answered in that way, until you get to the real root. Travel lots. Why? Because I really enjoy exploring new cultures, or I really enjoy the excitement of trying new experiences, etc., etc. Or it might be, whatever it might be. So once you've really dug down to find out what it is that's important to you, and what's important you spend your money on, this comes into this next bit here. So in terms of budgeting, what we would normally do is we would run through a cash flow exercise, and we would itemize. We'd look at the things we spend our money on over let's say the course of a month or a couple of weeks, and we would put them into 3 categories. So your first category is the fixed stuff. So this is the stuff that you don't really have any control over how much it is. It's the same every single month. It could be your rent. It could be your utility bills, if you had a house, your mortgage payments, your school fees, those real fixed things, right? Then we want to look at flexible. So this is your discretionary payment, and you can think of this as anytime you're handing over your credit card or cash, and that could be you're buying your Starbucks or your Pret-a-Manger sandwich, or you're going to the cinema, or you're buying clothes or ASOS, or you're buying an Amazon package, or whatever it might be. And then you want to have a look at your future. Now, your future is, if you go back to what's important to you, your future is things like your long-term stability, like your retirement funding. It could be a travel fund because it's stuff you haven't done yet. So it could be, you know, saving so you have an annual travel budget of X amount per year. And a good rule of thumb is each of those sections should be about a third. So of all your income, a third of your income should be roughly on fixed, a third should be on flexible, and a third should be on the future. And the future, by the way, this is the really important bit, because this is the bit of you really living your life, really enjoying yourself, and saving. You're effectively paying yourself, right? Because you're saving for your, I don't like the word retirement, but you're saving for your long-term future. And having fixed costs kept to a minimum, a third is a good rule of thumb, but the lower they are, the better you will feel about money. You won't feel, you know, you'll feel less stressed. You'll feel less like everything could implode. Whereas people that sort of overstretch themselves and run those fixed costs too high, that is where we typically see people really stressed about money, like sleepless nights and all that sort of thing. Just going back to that chart, is when you then look at what you're spending your money on, that the Venn chart is quite useful. You want to ensure that what you're actually spending your money on day to day or in the future is stuff that's important to you. Because if you're spending it on stuff that's not important to you, you've got two choices. You either change your habit and stop spending money on that thing, or you realize that is what's important to you, and therefore you can buy stuff guilt-free. Okay, we always say we don't necessarily like budgets as such, because a budget is a bit like a diet. You know, you kind of know what you have to do, but it's really difficult to stick to, and sometimes it's quite nice to just, you know, have a donut or whatever. But by having a good understanding of, you know, how much life costs and what's going into which bucket, the fixed versus flexible versus future, and understanding what's important to you, it means you can sort of pay yourself and put a decent amount in that future bucket without sacrificing the fixed or the flexible stuff. Like we always say, we want clients to live their best lives. No one wants to die and have on their tombstone like the richest man in the world. Or I had the most money in the world. There's no point having all that money if you're dead, right? So we'll come on to this, but the point is really about having a rich life full of experiences, full of enjoyment. But, you know, because we always say we want to help people spend the money, but in the right way. And so what's a key aspect in terms of your own financial planning at this stage? I'd say the initial thing is maintaining liquidity, and that is some form of safety net, right? So exactly as it says there, keeping cash on hand for emergencies. That could be, and it doesn't just have to be emergencies, right? It could be for spare of the moment in impulsive decisions. So it could be your car breaks down. It could be you suddenly decide you want to take a gap year. It could be that you've graduated, for whatever reason, even though you are the most qualified person for that role, you just can't find a job. And you want to have the flexibility to go, well, you know what, I can't find a job right now, so I'm going to go and travel. I'm going to go and do something else. I'm going to have other experiences that will really enrich my life, rather than be stressing about the fact you can't get a job and can't do that. And so building up a bit of a safety net, we normally say 3 to 6 months of living expenses. But I guess that's less relevant as a student, but certainly enough that you can survive for a couple of months without having to worry. Okay, it just builds in some flexibility. And then we go back to this point of optimizing for happiness. And it really is the thing we found with most of our clients, is it's about experiences and not things. And this graph, I think, sums it up quite well. They always say like money can't buy happiness, but actually it does buy time with the people you love. It buys you the ability to get really cool experiences, which, just sidetracking slightly, every interview I've had with every firm since I've left university, it was not about my degree that they cared about so much, and it wasn't about what school I went to they cared about so much. What really mattered was, did I have a cool experience that I could talk about passionately, share with them? Either they've had that same experience, whether it was like climbing a mountain or skiing somewhere or traveling to some remote part. Like, they are the things that recruiters love. And that's what makes you a more rounded person. And it also gives you freedom. What doesn't give you happiness is just lots of things, really. And on the next slide, this is a really key point: is wealth is what you don't see. And just because someone's got a really nice watch or a nice car, what that says is the only thing you know from that, if you see someone with a nice watch or a nice car, is that they don't have that money anymore because they bought that thing. So if a watch is 50 grand, they're 50 grand poorer. They might have a nice watch, but they don't have 50 grand in their account. And this picture of Rihanna is here because, I don't know if anyone remembers in the news, but she sued her financial advisor because she went broke. She had millions and millions and millions, but went broke. And the financial advisor's defense was, did I really need to have to tell her that if she bought all this stuff, she would end up with all this stuff and not the money? Okay. So just apparently she did need to be told that. So that really sort of sums up the money management piece from a university perspective. For those who are interested in investing and getting started with investing, the most important point that I can emphasize is to start early. The earlier you start, there's been so much research that shows that the earlier you start, effectively means you have to invest less to get to the same point as someone who starts a lot later, right? Just to get to the same point. If you start early, you can do it so easily, especially from the UK, well, globally now. You can open up a very cheap investment account. So I've mentioned some here: Interactive Brokers, AJ Bell in the UK, or Vanguard. And most of these platforms, I think you can invest as little as £25 a month or something like that to keep it open. Really cheap. And the link there, which I think has just been posted in the chat, is quite a useful link by a company called Nonovator. They give a breakdown of all the costs and charges of all the different platforms, and can help you do some research as to what the cheapest platform is. But for those of you who want to start, and to just start, and let's say start on that £25 a month minimum, is to just buy one ETF, an exchange traded fund. So it's one product that basically gives you exposure to all the great companies of the world, like thousands of companies all over the world. It's really low cost, and all it tries to do is match what the market does, right? So it's low cost, so you're not being charged lots of fees. It's globally diversified, which means it can never really blow up. One or two companies globally might go bust, sure, but the whole world's going to. And then just keep buying. Don't interrupt it. Don't withdraw it. Just keep buying. £25 a month or whatever amount it is. And this graph here will sort of demonstrate the effects of compounding. You know, each year you're hopefully getting a positive return, you know, couple of percent, couple of percent, couple of percent, and it will feel really slow and boring in the short term. But then there'll come a point in a number of years where there's that inflection point and it starts really being very powerful. And so we always say investing should be boring and not sexy, because it's if you go back to the rules that we mentioned right at the beginning, spend less than you earn, save the difference, buy a diversified portfolio of the great companies of the world. Well, this exchange traded fund will do exactly that. And then be patient and just keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it, go back to one and repeat. So that's exactly what this is trying to say. And then some useful banking specific tips, which I think I hope will tie back into some of the points we made earlier. So for those of you in the UK, you are very lucky that the UK banks are very, very cheap. It often doesn't cost money to cost anything to send money to other UK banks. It doesn't cost money to receive money. You can set up all your direct debit standing orders for free. It doesn't cost you anything to have an account. Conversely, if you've got accounts in Cayman, you know, they typically are very fee heavy. I think it costs about 45 CI to wire money internationally to a UK account. We've got a fee for that, which I'll come on to in a bit. And obviously changing money from KY or from CI to US to UK pounds has to go through US dollar first. So you've got the exchange rate of 0.84, and then you've got to work out how to exchange it. So my tip is, don't exchange it at the bank. Don't do a wire transfer directly from Butterfield or Cayman National, because you'll get charged a lot of fees. And what we want to do is minimize the fees. So in terms of your UK bank accounts, just open whatever account is the cheapest or the most free. Okay, don't try not to be lured in by gimmicks or like interest rates that are like really temporary. But what you want is to make sure the ongoing costs are free. And then I would open an account with Revolut or Wise. So these are both online accounts. They are technically not banks, but what because a bank will sort of take in deposits and lend out money for interest and create mortgages, etc. These are really good payment apps whereby you can wire money in, you can do currency conversions at rates that traders or the banks get. So really good rates, very low fees, and you can wire money internationally really cheaply. And one of the tricks that we use, because we obviously need to get the money from a Cayman bank to one of these apps, is if you can top up these apps using a debit card. And so what I do with my Revolut app is I use my US dollar account debit card from Butterfield. I top it up with whatever money I want to send to the UK and convert into pounds. It doesn't charge me anything to do that top up, because it's like you're using a debit card payment as opposed to wiring money. And then I convert within the app to pounds, and it's whatever the rate is, but there are some fees, but it's very, 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 very low, and it's much lower than the banks, and you get the rate that is the market rate rather than any other. And Wise, I think, operates similarly. Okay, and then I can either keep it on my card, or I can wire it to my UK account with Lloyds, HSBC, whoever it is. So I would really, really, really encourage you to to all look into both of these options. They're the best ones we've seen so far, but I think there are other options available. And then the other 2 points I would sort of say with your UK accounts is most student accounts offer quite attractive overdraft facilities. I would really try to avoid using them. You get charged lots of fees, quite high interest to be in those. And one of the key things I probably didn't go into enough detail is, before you start investing or really doing anything, you really want to make sure you've got that debt paid off. Mortgages are slightly different because that, I guess that's long-term kind of good debt, but you don't really, if you do have credit cards, you want to make sure that you're paying them off monthly, so you're not getting charged really high interest rates. Actually, it's often quite good to use a credit card regularly if you can afford to pay it off monthly, because it will build up a credit rating, which will help you get better interest rates for when you do decide to buy a mortgage, especially if that's in the UK and you decide to stay there. But try to avoid using an overdraft and try to avoid running up and maxing out credit cards and then not paying them off. Like, they're the two key things that I think once you leave university are the killers in terms of that affordability. And that, you want, once you leave university and you start earning your own money, you really want to be able to spend all that money on things you want, not on bank fees and interest.
Sorry, Guy. If for those who don't know, what is an overdraft?
Oh, sorry. Yes, very good question. So an overdraft facility is the bank will, you have to normally pre-agree it, but the bank will let you go into debit up to a certain amount. So I think for many student ones, it could be anywhere between £100 and £1,000. And it's almost like short-term borrowing, but you obviously have to pay it off. They're handy if you're in a really, really tight pinch or in an emergency, but because you're all amazing and you would have built up an emergency cash buffer anyway, you really shouldn't need to go in it, because the fees are expensive. Is that clear? Cool. And then for those of you who are interested, in our office, we've got a really nice bookshelf, and on our bookshelf, among the hundreds of books we have, are these ones. And these really are the best books that we have found for that high level money management, how to build your wealth over the longer term. And they're broadly similar, but they all sort of give you different angles and give you something else different. If you read all 11 of these, you will be very well placed to be to sort of be a good investor over the long term.
Right.
So does anyone have any questions? I that, by the way, I'm really well aware that was like a 20-25 minute rush through money management and investing and banking tips, and you could spend hours on each of those topics. Was there anything that anyone had any questions on at all?
I have a question if no one else does. Sure. Guy, you mentioned kind of when you're leaving university and you're making your own money, that's when you should really focus on obviously not having debt, etc. And you mentioned a good thing to build up credit, especially if you want to buy a house and get a better rate for your mortgage and stuff. When would be the ideal time in your kind of frame of mind to get a credit card, your first credit card? And bearing in mind, some people kind of do postgraduate masters where they're still in education, but maybe they'll have a bit of money that they've seen, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's a very good question. I would say if you can get one and you are the type of person that knows they're not going to run up massive credit card debt, and you will have the discipline to pay it off monthly, and you live within your means, then the earlier the better. because the longer you have a credit file, you know, the easier you'll find things like mortgages. And that it's weird there, especially in the UK, there's all sorts of things that you can buy that you need a credit file for, not just a mortgage or buying a house. And the longer you have it, let's say you do actually need a credit card in the future, you get better rates, so better interest rates, rather than someone who's completely unknown. So typically a credit card, the way it works is, which I always find really bizarre, but the people that they deem to be the most risky will be given the highest interest rate, because they need compensation for the risk that they might not be paid back and that person could go bankrupt. The people that are very, I guess you would class as wealthy or financially stable, typically get the best interest rates, which means it's cheaper to borrow money. So it's always back to front for the people that actually need it. But the real key thing is, if you are going to get it, just make sure your credit limit is manageable, and make sure that you're disciplined enough to pay it off every month and not run up huge credit card debts, because that interest can be very difficult to service if it's left just for long periods of time.
Does anybody else have any questions? You guys can pop them in the chat. If not, that's also okay, because we will have a poll coming up that kind of asks you if there's anything more you'd like to hear about, and we can answer questions related to that. But use this time to pick Guy's brain if you have any burning questions. If nothing pops up, we can move on, because I am conscious of time.
I do have a question. You were talking about moving money from Cayman US account to Revolut. With your Revolut, did you use a UK? Because I think you need like a UK address to set it up, or did you use a US address? Or
yeah, that's a really good point. So Revolut, yes, you do need a UK address to set it up. Wise, however, you don't need a UK address. So Wise works with a Cayman address. I haven't checked which other countries it also works with, but for those who don't have a UK address, Wise typically works quite well.
okay, cool. Thank you.
No problem.
Anybody else have any questions? You guys can just unmute yourselves and feel free to shout them if you need. If not, then we can come back to any questions later, give you guys time to think and absorb everything that's just been said. Especially for people that were potentially feeling a bit cold before, might take time to trickle in. In the meantime, Zoe and myself are going to quickly go over some student-specific tips for implementing these practices of budgeting and money saving and kind of living within your means where possible overseas. Obviously, we know that the move overseas can seem extremely daunting money-wise. Not only are you probably managing money for the first time in your life, large amounts of money, that's a bit more than, say, like a weekly allowance given from your parents, but also you're operating in an environment wherein you don't know the price of things. It's probably a currency that you're not too familiar with, and you've never bought, you know, toiletries before. You've never, you know, you're making purchases that normally a guardian would potentially manage for you. So we're going to give you some quick tips, no matter where you are in the world, whether you're UK, Cayman, or US based, for how to kind of survive on a student budget and it not be too painful. So you might be thinking, where do I even start? There's so much that I need to spend money on. It's all really confusing, but we're going to kind of try and break it down into the basics between where to shop for your kind of weekly or monthly basics, and then other big choices related to kind of more fixed costs like Guy was talking about. So when you get to the UK, obviously, you know, you have to buy a lot of things. Hopefully your rent is taken care of and your fees are taken care of. You know how much those are, but you're going to have to buy other things like, you know, the basics: clothes, food, transport. Those are kind of things that you're always going to have to spend money on. And if you can keep those costs down to a minimum, then it leaves you a lot more money to do other things, like go to the movies or go to the pub, what have you. So coming from a UK, I'll start from a UK perspective and then I'll move on to a US perspective because I'm just more familiar with the UK. When you go, say you're arriving as a fresher, so I know some of you guys might be in your first year, some may be in their second year, and some may be prospective students. Let's do a little POV. You're a fresher or you're a freshman and you've just arrived to your university town or city, and you need to furnish your room and you need to get groceries. Basically get the essentials. Where to shop? When you go to a department store, you might be really tempted to just go to the closest one or go to, you know, the one that your parents or grandparents recommend. I would say don't do that. Do your research and try and find some of the cheaper stores. So for example, you might live really close to a Sainsbury's or a Target in the US. Those are kind of, they're not expensive, they're not the highest range shops, but they're quite mid-range, and things week to week, month to month do add up. And if you can find the cheaper versions of those stores, you'll end up saving a lot of money in the long run. So for example, for supermarkets, Lidl or Aldi are the cheapest options in the UK, and you will save a lot of money shopping there over, say, your Sainsbury's or your Tesco's. In the US, Walmart, I know, is a very good one. And in relation to department stores, in the UK, avoid things like John Lewis or M&S or, you know, the local Beautiful Home store down the road, and try and look at Primark, Asda, or the bargain store. In the US, I know Walmart just has everything. And for example, the Dollar Tree, Dollar General, anything with $1 or 99 cents or £1 in the name is typically going to do you pretty good. And then trying to get your basics from there, and then obviously treat yourself and have a look in the other stores and browse. But just know that if you consistently stick to shopping at the cheaper stores, you'll kind of have a lot of money left over at the end of every month, and then you can decide what to do with that. Whether that's shop at Sainsbury's every now and again for convenience, or splurge on an M&S meal deal. It just gives you more freedom to have more money in the bank at the end of the day. And at the end of the day, I can say that Lidl has great food. You know, it's good quality for cheap prices. So don't think you're getting something dodgy. You are getting good food. In terms of clothes, I know, for example, with the government scholarship, there is a small allowance to buy cold weather clothes when you move overseas. There's a lot of places in the US that also get quite chilly. I would say, besides, you know, going to cheaper department stores like TK Maxx, TJ Maxx, have a look at like secondhand shop. I know that there aren't that many in Cayman, and secondhand shopping isn't trendy in Cayman really, but in the UK and in the US, your Goodwill, your British Heart Foundations, any kind of shop that has a charity logo on it, basically you go in, you can buy clothes for a very discounted price. They are secondhand, but they're in good condition, and obviously they've been washed and steamed and everything by the store, and you can get them for very, very cheap. And it's really good for just getting your cold weather essentials, your first coat, your first scarf, your first winter boots, and then that way you don't blow your £200 or $200 budget the first week. You kind of have the options to browse on ASOS for a good deal, and feel like you're not out of your depth there. There's a hot tip on the screen. Check your local supermarket for when they release goods on sale. I know when we're in Hurley's, it's kind of like, what's the point of even looking, because everything's going to run me about $20 anyway. But in the UK, you can get some really good deals. Usually they have like a clearance section of like things that are about to go off in a couple of days. And if you're just shopping for one, it's pretty easy to get through that food and it not go bad. So you can kind of look at deals, look at things that are, you know, close to their due date. The freezer section is also really, really good for that. And I know in the US, they do kind of similar deals. Your club cards, loyalty programs are really great to look out for as well. And now Zoe will quickly talk about some other big choices and how to save money on those things.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ayanda and Guy. So obviously when you're going abroad, you're worried about how am I going to furnish my dorm, where am I going to shop? But there are some other big things looming in the back of your mind that I know before I moved overseas, I never thought about it because my parents would, you know, take care of it. They'd set things up like your bank account or like a phone plan. So for bank accounts and, all these different plans, the best advice I think we could possibly give you, similar to the supermarkets, is shop around, do your research and compare. Because if, like Guy said, if you've identified what's important to you, what are you going to use it for? Like if you're not a type of person that uses a lot of data, don't look at plans with lots of data. Look at plans that provide, their services that you need. If you're, if you want a specific type of bank account, look at those in particular. Go on different websites that compare based on your region. One thing to note is, particularly in the UK, you'll see things that are student bank accounts. Usually you're not eligible for these as students because you have to be resident in the UK for, I think it's 3 years. So you'll probably go with the most basic one they have to offer. But read those fine print terms and conditions, like, does it offer a contactless debit card? Some bank accounts don't now, it's non-contactless. So that'll affect how you set up things like your Apple Pay or just ease of getting around. So do your research. It can seem pretty daunting, but there are a lot of websites that compare things like energy providers, phone plans, and bank accounts. Later on, once you move out of your student dorms, you might hear, things about council tax in the UK. That is also something, it's just another big cost that can add up over time. You can get exemptions for your student periods when you have a specific letter from your university, but it's something that you might not initially think about and should keep in those fixed costs when you're doing, your, 3 big areas. Keep that in the back of your mind. Have all those big costs planned out in front of you when you're thinking about your budget and your income flow. And don't be afraid. The information is out there. You just have to take some time to sort through it. But now on to my very favorite part, some discounts. So I'm a huge discount person. I am an avid user of Too Good To Go, which is a food waste reduction app. You can basically order food in advance that is going to be thrown away at the end of the day. If you know that you're not going to have time to go to the shop, you can just pick that up, save some food from being wasted. Uni Days and Student Beans, they have deals for all different types of, stores and shops. If you're buying, for example, even your first computer, if you're going to get like a MacBook or something, they have student discount codes. Like Ayanda mentioned, for supermarkets, your local supermarket probably has a loyalty card, and those points will rack up. I think one of my biggest regrets is not getting one in my first or second year of university. I got my Tesco Club card in the 3rd year, and already I have gone to the shop for small different things. I've forgotten some stuff and not paid a single thing because I had points added up. So those points, like I said with investing, start early, get those points racked up. Same thing with your local pharmacy. If you have access to student gyms, there's different ways to look for those student prices and take advantage of those from early. The Fork also, I think it's a UK specific thing, but it's a place where you can make restaurant bookings for half off even. If you're doing something where you have to spend money, check if there's a student discount, because there probably is. But yeah, that's all on that end.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Zoe, for those tips. I didn't even know about the Fork, so I'm going to look that up after this call. But yeah, unlike in Cayman, where student discounts aren't really a thing, they're everywhere in the UK, and they're very, very widespread in the US as well. So if somewhere says we don't do student discount, you can kind of be like, oh, well, I'm going to find somewhere that does, and walk away, because as the consumer, as a student, there's a huge market for companies to offer student discounts. And so, shop around and just look for the best price is our advice on that.